The night started like any other, quiet enough to make the world feel harmless. Then the phone rang, slicing through the silence with a chill. A trembling voice begged for help, but refused to give a name. Something heavy moved in the background, like someone was dragging secrets across the floor. I felt a warning settle in my chest, sharp and cold. Nothing about that call was normal, and every instinct told me to walk away. But curiosity pressed harder than caution, pulling me into the unknown. Moments later, another message appeared, this time from an unknown number. A single line glowed on the screen, telling me I was already involved. I didn't know whether to run or stay, but the truth was no longer mine to choose. Whatever waited ahead had already crossed the line into my life. I didn't sleep after the call, and the sky was still dark when I grabbed my jacket. My neighborhood felt different that morning, like the air carried someone else's breath. I kept replaying the trembling voice in my head, searching for something familiar. Every detail slipped like water, leaving only a sense of danger behind. At the corner cafe, I tried to calm myself with coffee, but my hands kept shaking. The barista, a woman named Claire, noticed and asked if I was all right. I lied and said I was just tired, but she didn't seem convinced. She handed me the drink with a look that lingered longer than usual. Before I could take a sip, my phone vibrated again inside my pocket. It was another message from the same unknown number. This time it held an address and a warning not to involve anyone else. My stomach tightened as I stared at the screen, torn between fear and curiosity. I stepped outside, feeling the cold wind push against my face like a reminder. Cars rushed past, unaware that my life had tilted into something darker. I typed a reply asking who was texting me, but no answer came. Instead, another message appeared telling me to come quickly. The urgency in the words made my pulse hammer against my ribs. I didn't know why this stranger reached out to me, yet I couldn't ignore it. The address was on the other side of town, in a quiet residential area. I called a rideshare and tried not to imagine the worst as the car approached. Inside the vehicle, the driver made casual conversation, but I barely responded. My eyes kept drifting to the passing streets as dread slowly settled in. Halfway there, a new message arrived telling me not to trust anyone on the way. The timing was too precise, as if someone watched every move I made. I locked the phone and looked out the window, feeling exposed. The city lights blurred into streaks, fading as we drove deeper into suburbia. When we reached the destination, the driver hesitated before letting me out. He said the house looked abandoned and asked if I was sure about stopping. I forced a reassuring nod, even though my throat had gone dry. The yard was overgrown, and the windows were dark like hollow eyes. A thin fog curled around the porch steps, making the place feel unreal. My phone buzzed again, telling me to go inside without knocking. The door creaked open with the slightest push, as if expecting me. Dust floated in the air, glittering in the faint morning light. I stepped forward, feeling the old wooden floor groan under my weight. Somewhere deeper inside, a soft sound echoed like someone breathing. I whispered a greeting, but the house swallowed my voice whole. Then I saw a figure at the end of the hallway, standing perfectly still. The posture looked tense, as if they feared turning around. My heart climbed into my throat as I took another step. The figure whispered my name, even though I had never given it. That was the moment I realized the caller knew far more about me than I knew about them. The figure at the end of the hallway didn't move, but the whisper of my name clung to the walls. I tried to steady my breathing, yet each inhale felt too loud in the heavy silence. A faint light flickered from a room to the left, casting long shadows across the floorboards. I stepped toward the figure, and the air grew colder with every inch I closed. When I finally reached them, the hallway bulb crackled above us as if warning me. The person turned slowly, revealing a bruised face and terrified eyes. He introduced himself as Mark, his voice breaking like thin glass. He said he was the one who called me, though he wouldn't explain why. Before I could ask more, he grabbed my arm and pulled me into the side room. Inside, the smell of dust and metal filled the dim space. A small table sat in the center, covered with scattered documents and photographs. Mark told me someone was after him, someone who watched the house from the shadows. He pointed to the window, insisting we avoid standing too close. Outside, the fog thickened, curling around the glass like fingers trying to break in. I asked why he contacted me, a complete stranger, instead of calling the police. He hesitated, eyes darting toward the door as if afraid of being overheard. He said my name had appeared on a list he found hidden inside a locked drawer. The list contained people he claimed were being targeted one by one. My throat tightened when he said 2 names were already crossed out. He handed me a photograph showing a woman I didn't recognize. Her face was blurred, but the fear in her expression felt painfully real. Mark explained she disappeared 3 days earlier from a nearby town. He believed the same person who took her was now coming for him. Before I could piece everything together, a loud thud echoed from the hallway. Mark flinched and backed away from the door, his hands shaking violently. I moved closer, trying to listen, but the house had gone eerily still again. The silence pressed against my ears until I felt the weight of it. Mark whispered that whoever was outside knew he wasn't alone anymore. He insisted we leave through the back door before it was too late. I followed him down a narrow corridor cluttered with old furniture. Each step creaked, sounding louder than it should in the suffocating quiet. Near the end of the hall, Mark stopped and pressed his ear to the wall. He said he heard footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. I strained to listen, but only caught the faint scrape of something dragging. Mark pushed open the back door, and cold air rushed over us like a warning. We stepped outside, the yard swallowed by fog thick enough to hide anything. Mark pointed to a narrow path leading toward the woods behind the house. He said we had to keep moving, no matter what we heard behind us. As we hurried forward, a distant voice called Mark's name from the darkness. He froze mid-step as the voice repeated itself, slower and deeper this time. I grabbed his arm and pulled him along, refusing to look back. But even as we ran, the feeling grew that something unseen followed us, close enough to breathe on our necks. We ran through the fog, our footsteps muffled by the damp ground. Mark's grip on my arm was tight, almost painful, but I didn't pull away. The trees loomed above us, black silhouettes against the gray morning sky. Every rustle of leaves made me flinch, expecting someone to jump out. Mark whispered that the person following us could hear every move. I asked how he knew so much, but he shook his head, refusing to answer. The path split, and Mark pointed left, insisting it led to an abandoned shed. We hurried toward it, branches scraping our faces as we stumbled along. When we reached the shed, it looked empty, but Mark pushed the door open cautiously. Inside, the air smelled of rot and wet wood, making my stomach churn. Mark lit a small lantern, casting flickering shadows across the walls. He motioned me to sit on an old crate while he checked the perimeter. The floorboards groaned under his weight, echoing through the small space. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Then I heard it, a faint tapping at the window, slow and deliberate. Mark froze mid-step, signaling me to stay quiet and hold my breath. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, echoing in the tiny shed. I could see his jaw tighten as he whispered a warning not to move. Suddenly, the lantern flickered violently, then went out, plunging us into darkness. My heart pounded, and I could hear Mark breathing, sharp and fast. The tapping stopped, replaced by a dragging sound across the wooden floor outside. We waited, listening to the faint creak of the shed's exterior as if testing our courage. Mark whispered that we had to move again before it decided to enter. We climbed out a back window, landing silently in the overgrown grass. The fog wrapped around us, making it impossible to see more than a few feet. Mark led me through the woods, using memory rather than sight to guide us. Branches tore at our clothes, and roots threatened to trip us with every step. I asked how much farther, and he said only a few more minutes to safety. Then we heard it, a low, guttural growl emanating from the darkness behind. I froze, feeling the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on my back. Mark pulled me forward, whispering that stopping meant certain danger. We broke through the tree line into an open clearing, the fog thinning slightly. Mark pointed to a small cabin barely visible ahead, almost swallowed by trees. Relief surged through me, but he warned that the danger wasn't gone yet. We approached the cabin quietly, the grass damp under our feet. Inside, it was small and sparse, with a single fireplace and a locked door. Mark locked the door behind us, then leaned against it, breathing heavily. I asked if we were finally safe, and he shook his head slowly. He said the person, following him, always knew where he was. Every place he went could be a trap, every safe spot temporary. I realized then that our ordeal was far from over. The growl returned, faint but persistent, reminding us the chase was not finished. Mark looked at me, eyes filled with fear and determination. He whispered that we needed a plan, or neither of us would make it through the night. Mark and I stayed inside the cabin, listening as the forest swallowed every sound outside. He paced the floor, muttering to himself while I tried to make sense of everything. I asked him why he involved me, why he didn't reach out to the authorities. He said the moment he did, the list would start shrinking faster. Every name crossed out meant another person vanished without a trace. I shivered, realizing I could become one of those names soon. Mark pointed to a map pinned on the wall, covered in notes and scribbles. He traced a route with his finger, marking escape paths and danger zones. We discussed each one, debating which led us to safety and which was a trap. Time felt strange, stretching endlessly as shadows crept across the cabin floor. Suddenly, a loud knock rattled the door, sending a jolt through my chest. Mark froze, staring at it like he recognized the sound immediately. He whispered that it wasn't him coming, it was something worse. The knocking grew heavier, urgent, demanding entry without pause. I held my breath, my mind racing through every possible scenario. Mark grabbed a rusty crowbar from the corner, gripping it tightly. He whispered instructions, telling me to stay behind him at all times. The knocking stopped suddenly, replaced by a scratching along the wooden door. It sounded deliberate, like someone testing the strength of the lock. I could feel a presence pressing against the walls, trying to force its way in. Mark whispered that we didn't have much time before it found another way. We moved quietly to the back of the cabin, searching for a hidden exit. A small trapdoor lay partially hidden under a threadbare rug. He lifted it slowly, revealing a narrow tunnel that led under the cabin. The air inside was damp, thick with the smell of earth and decay. We slipped in, crawling carefully so as not to make a sound. The tunnel was narrow, forcing us to move in single file, Mark first. I could hear the faint echo of footsteps above, slow and methodical. Mark whispered that whoever followed him was highly skilled at tracking. We crawled through the darkness, guided only by a faint light from the end. The walls were cold and rough, scraping our clothes and skin as we passed. I tried to stay calm, but every noise made me jump and hold my breath. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a small clearing under a thick canopy. Mark pulled me out, and we crouched behind a fallen log to catch our breath. I asked where we were, and he said it was a temporary hiding spot. He explained that the person hunting him had eyes everywhere. Even now, they could be watching from the shadows, waiting for a mistake. We stayed hidden, listening to the forest come alive with distant noises. Mark said we needed to move again before the first light of day. Every step forward would have to be calculated, precise, or it could be our last. I realized then that the game had changed. Running was no longer enough. We would have to fight, outsmart, and survive until the list stopped growing. Mark looked at me, determination hardening his expression, ready to face whatever came next. We moved through the forest cautiously, the early morning mist hiding our path. Mark led the way, scanning every shadow as if expecting something to strike. I tried to keep pace, but exhaustion made each step heavier than the last. Branches tore at our clothes, and thorns scratched at exposed skin relentlessly. Mark whispered that we were nearing an old safe house he used as a fallback. I asked how he knew it would still be empty, and he said he had no guarantee. The forest seemed alive, every rustle and crack making my heart skip a beat. Suddenly, a distant scream cut through the fog, sharp and urgent. We froze, listening as the echo faded into the trees, leaving a haunting silence. Mark said it wasn't for us, but I couldn't shake the feeling danger was close. He pointed to a barely visible path, veering off the main trail. We followed it, stepping carefully over roots and rocks, silent as shadows. The safe house appeared as a small cabin, half hidden by overgrown vines. Mark checked the windows and doors before motioning for me to follow inside. The interior smelled of damp wood and mildew, but it was empty for now. We barricaded the doors with old furniture, trying to create a temporary refuge. Mark pulled out a notebook filled with names, dates, and cryptic notes. He explained that the list wasn't random. It followed a pattern he barely understood. Every crossed-out name meant someone vanished under mysterious circumstances. I asked if the authorities had been contacted for any of them. He shook his head, saying involvement would only accelerate the process. We listened carefully as the wind rattled the old cabin, masking distant sounds. Mark said we couldn't stay long, but we needed a plan to find the next safe point. I asked what our next move should be, and he suggested splitting the tasks. He would investigate nearby towns for clues, while I stayed hidden here. I protested, saying it was too dangerous to separate, but he insisted. He said information was the only weapon we had, and every moment counted. Before leaving, he drew a rough map and handed it to me, marked with escape routes. I memorized it quickly, knowing one misstep could be fatal. Mark slipped out into the mist, moving silently toward the first town on the list. I stayed behind, listening to every sound, counting heartbeats and holding my breath. Hours passed slowly, the tension stretching every second into eternity. Then I heard a soft knock at the door, cautious, almost deliberate. I froze, unsure if it was Mark returning or the threat catching up to us. The knock came again, louder this time, testing our patience and fear. I gripped the crowbar Mark left behind, ready for whatever awaited me. The doorknob rattled slightly, and I held my breath as shadows shifted. A voice whispered my name through the crack, familiar but distorted. I realized then that staying hidden wasn't enough. Confrontation was inevitable. Whatever waited outside was no longer just following, it was learning. And I knew the next moments would decide whether we survived or vanished next. The door shuddered under the force of someone pushing from the outside. I tightened my grip on the crowbar, heart hammering against my ribs. The whispers outside grew louder, mixing with low, guttural breathing. I whispered Mark's name, hoping he had returned or was close by. The doorknob rattled violently, and a shadow pressed through the small crack. I swung the crowbar, striking hard against the figure, hearing a sharp grunt. It recoiled, then moved again, faster this time, testing my defenses. I realized the person wasn't human, or at least not fully so. The shadows shifted, stretching along the walls as if alive with intent. I backed up slowly, keeping the crowbar between us like a lifeline. A sudden crash came from the back window, sending splinters across the floor. The creature, or person, entered through the broken glass silently, fluid and fast. I swung again, but it ducked and moved toward me with unnatural speed. My mind raced, trying to remember Mark's map and escape routes. The hallway seemed endless, twisting, turning, making it impossible to plan. I heard footsteps from above, lighter, human, and my hope surged briefly. Mark appeared at the top of the stairs, shouting my name, voice urgent. The creature hesitated, then lunged toward him instead, giving me a chance. I scrambled toward the back door, feet slipping on the wet floorboards. Mark grabbed a chair, swinging it like a weapon, keeping the threat at bay. The creature hissed, a sound that chilled me to the bone, eyes glowing faintly. I reached the door and flung it open, cold air rushing in like freedom. Mark joined me, and we ran through the clearing, branches tearing at our skin. Behind us, the creature followed, silent, relentless, never tiring. We ducked behind fallen logs, catching our breath, plotting the next move. Mark whispered that we had one chance to lose it in the dense woods ahead. We moved silently, carefully, using every shadow to conceal our path. The fog thickened, hiding us but also masking every potential hazard. Suddenly, a faint whistle echoed, low and menacing, sending shivers down my spine. Mark whispered it was a lure, a way to separate us, and we stayed close. Hours passed like this, creeping forward, avoiding sound, avoiding sight. Then we stumbled upon a small stream, its water reflecting a dim, eerie light. Mark said we could follow it to an old bridge, where he hoped to find safety. The creature appeared on the opposite bank, watching silently, calculating. We held our ground for a moment, adrenaline pulsing, unsure who would move first. Finally, we ran, following the stream, splashing through the shallow water. The bridge emerged through the fog, old and creaking under our weight. Mark whispered to cross quickly, ignoring the sounds of pursuit behind us. Halfway across, the creature appeared at the edge of the fog, frozen for a moment. I felt a surge of hope, that maybe we had outrun it, if only for now. We reached the other side, hearts racing, lungs burning but still alive. Mark looked at me, eyes filled with exhaustion and relief, whispering that we survived another night. But both of us knew the hunt wasn't over, only delayed, and the list still waited. We collapsed on the far side of the bridge, gasping for air, soaked and trembling. The fog hung thick, hiding the path behind us and any sign of pursuit. Mark looked at me, eyes weary but sharp, still scanning for danger. I asked if it was finally over, and he shook his head slowly. He said surviving tonight only meant we bought time, not safety. The list was still out there, waiting, and someone else could vanish next. We agreed to move before dawn, putting as much distance as possible between us. Every step was calculated, every shadow treated as a potential threat. The forest around us seemed quiet, but our senses screamed otherwise. Mark whispered that the key was staying unpredictable, never following the same path. We started walking toward the next town, using backroads and trails. The rising sun painted the sky in streaks of gold and gray, fragile hope. I realized fear had become our constant companion, sharper than any weapon. Mark told me we couldn't trust anyone fully, not even those who seemed friendly. We passed abandoned houses and empty streets, hearts beating in rhythm with the unknown. By mid-morning, we reached a small safe house Mark had scouted weeks before. We locked the doors and windows, temporarily safe but never truly secure. I sat down, exhausted, staring at the notebook of names that haunted us. Mark promised we'd keep moving, keep fighting, and survive another day. The forest behind us was silent now, but we knew it watched, waiting for a mistake. And though the hunt was far from over, for the first time, we caught a glimpse of hope.